Valiant Smashers is right around the corner, and the deck that has everybody's eye is the Centurion archetype, or the Centur-Ion as the TCG has now named it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Cards and Coffee. Today, we're going to be going over everything you need to know about the Centurion deck. Maybe you're hoping to pick this deck up yourself and wanting to play it, or you just want to be aware of what it does. That way you're prepared for it at your locals or regionals or YCSs. By the end of this video, you'll understand what this deck can do, and I'll even give you some counterplay and some side decking options as well. Plus, at the end of the video, I'll give you guys a basic deck list to go off of. That way you guys can start testing the deck yourself. And also, I'll give you my honest opinion on what I expect this deck to actually do in today's current format. But first, as always, if you haven't already, go grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Alright, so the Centurion deck definitely is going to have an effect on the upcoming format. This deck has a lot going for it. Not only is it a deck that basically has a bunch of one-card combos, but the engine requirements you need to play are very low, so you have so much room for non-engine, so you can tech it out in any way that you see fit for the upcoming format. So simply put, this deck revolves around making level 12 synchros, and the niche of the deck is all the main deck monsters can be put in the spell and trap zone as continuous traps. While they're there, they also have the effect that they can then special summon themselves to the field, and then of course they have on-field effects as well. These kind of effects remind me of something like Dragunity. That's really cool that we're having more kinds of cards that do this. But the one unique thing about this deck is, since they're considered trap cards, you can also use these effects to summon themselves on your opponent's turn. None of the main deck monsters can disrupt you, but the field spell lets you synchro summon on your opponent's turn. So it's very easy to see that not only are you setting up a board going first, but then you can play on your opponent's turn as well, which I'm sure most of you already know this deck can Calamity Lock very easily. But before we go over all that, let's talk about the first monster of this archetype. Primera is a level 4 spellcaster tuner that is also a light for the deck. On normal or special, it can add any of your Centurion cards from your deck to your hand. Like I mentioned, all these monsters also have the effect that when it's a continuous trap, you can special summon it to the field during the main phase. And a little bonus about this card is, while it's a trap card, your Centurions that are level 5 or higher can't be destroyed by card effects, so pretty neat. Usually this is going to grab you the field spell, which we'll talk about in a sec, but you can also use it to grab extenders or maybe grab your trap cards for disruptions if you already have access to it. The next monster we have is Trudea, which is a level 4 dark pyro monster, which is actually kind of relevant because in the future we're going to get Bonfire. This is really crazy because not only is Primera a one-card combo, but Trudea is as well, so more Bonfires just means, well, more consistency. As far as what Trudea can do is, during the main phase, you can place it and any other Centurion from your hand or deck into the spell and trap zone as a continuous trap. If you use this effect, you can't special summon Trudea for the rest of the turn, which I actually forgot to mention about Primera as well. There's this lock that all of them have where when you use their on-field effect, you can no longer special summon them. Again, this also has the effect that it can special summon itself to the field when it's a trap card, but you also have the option to increase its level by 4. Making it an 8 to, well, set up level 12 synchros. The last main deck monster is Emeth 6. This is definitely a card you're going to have to at least run at 1, but I could definitely see running 2 as well. The main reason you have to play this card is it's a level 8, so making the level 12 synchros become a lot easier. But it also has the bonus effect where when it's in the hand or in the graveyard, you can quick effect target one of your Centurion monsters, put it in the spell and trap zone, and then special summon it to the field. This is really great because it's just a free level 8 body that you can get out on the field. And of course, as mentioned, it does have the effect as well. When it is a trap card, it can special summon itself to the field, setting up all those synchro plays. Now, the last monster is actually the synchro for the deck, Legadia. It's a level 12 synchro. It has a cool effect where your monsters with 2,000 or less attack cannot be destroyed by battle, so that's pretty neat. But the really great thing about this card is whenever it's special summoned, you can draw a card, and then after you have the option to destroy one of your opponent's monsters. But during the end phase, this card also lets you take one of your Centurions from your hand or grave and place it as a continuous trap. This is the main way we can start special summoning bodies bodies on our opponent's turn, and again, when we have the field spell, we can use it to synchro summon during your opponent's turn. Plus, it's a great way to put Primera in the trap zone, so not only are you searching cards to do your combo on your turn, but it gives you follow-up by summoning it on your opponent's turn as well. Centurion stand-up is the field spell I keep talking about. It is a really amazing card for this deck. One neat thing about it is it can't be destroyed while you have Centurion monsters on the field. It's kind of nice because a card like Ghost Ogre, which we will talk about later, is pretty decent against this deck, so it has a way to protect itself from that card. But the main effect that this card offers is that you can send a card from your hand to the grave, and then you can take any of your Centurion monsters and place it in the spell and trap zone as a continuous trap. Oh, and as mentioned, whenever your continuous traps special summon themselves to the field, immediately after it resolves, you can then synchro summon on your opponent's turn. It's pretty dang crazy. This deck also has a teleport called Emblem of Oath. It actually has two effects where when you activate it, you can put a Centurion monster from your deck into the spell and trap zone as a continuous trap. The one downside of this card is while that card's on the field, you are locked into making Centurion monsters for the extra deck. But again, once you get it off the field, then it's no problem. So while this does have a restriction, it's not really that bad. But also, if you don't need the monster in your spell and trap zone, then it also has the effect where you can set one of your Centurion spells or traps as well, which is pretty dang great. Again, since this deck has a bunch of one-card combos that accomplish the same end board, there are going to be times where you have multiples in your hand. So the nice thing about Oath is that if you already have full combo, then now you can use this to not only search extenders, but you can use it to set the trap cards that this deck has as well, adding more interruptions to play with. Centurion True Awakening is the counter trap of the deck. This is kind of like the War Chariot of the deck. When a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated, you could send a continuous trap from your field to the grave to negate the activation and destroy it. This card is obviously very strong, but I feel like this is going to be a card that ends up in the side deck for, well, when you go first. The one trap I really expect to see in people's main deck is Centurion Phalanx. This normal trap is kind of like a Farfa. You can target a monster on the field and then banish it until your opponent's next standby phase. Obviously, this is a great disruption, but you could even use it on your cards as well. But the really great thing about this card is it has a graveyard effect as well, where you can banish it from the grave to special summon one of your Centurion synchros, but then you reduce its attack by 1500. As mentioned, the synchro doesn't need to be synchro summoned to gain those effects, so again, when you special summon it, you'll get to draw a card and then pop a card as an interruption, so obviously this is really great. Now that we've gone through all that, let's go over one of the basic combos this deck can do: Calamity, locking your opponent and, well, stopping them from playing the game. Alright, so this deck's really great because all the combos are basically one-card combos. You do need a card to discard off of the field spell. It gets replaced with your draw, so that's pretty nice. But again, as long as you see one of your starters, then you're good to go. But I guess technically it's a 1.5 card combo to do any of these combos. So, of course, the first combo is going to be the Primera, which is the Stratos. We're going to go ahead and normal summon it, then use the effect to grab the field spell. Obviously, we need this to go ahead and get our Trudea into the trap zone, so we'll go ahead and activate it, pitch a card, and then put it in the trap zone. And then we can now use its effect to summon itself, which is because now, well, we're going to use the effect to put itself back, and then we can put Emeth the 6th there as well, which is important because now Emeth the 6th can summon itself, and it's a level 8, and we can go right into our Legadia, draw a card, and then we can end our turn. And of course, in the end phase, we can put Primera back, then of course to search on our opponent's turn as well. So that's pretty dang good. Now our opponent will go ahead and commit something. Now we can use both our trap effects to then summon themselves. Now our field spell will activate, and our Stratos as well, so we can kind of chain block our search. We can get our follow-up, make ourselves the Crimson Dragon, and then of course Crimson Dragon can now target the Legadia, and well, we can tag out into the best monster ever, Calamity. Pretty straightforward for the most part, nothing too crazy. Again, you get a draw, and of course Calamity lock. You get to search follow-up with Primera because you're summoning it on your opponent's turn as well. Again, this combo works with Primera, the field spell, or in this case Trudea as well. So just to quickly show you, we'll go through what Trudea does if you open her. So of course, pretty straightforward. We're going to normal summon her. We're going to use her effect to put her in the spell and trap, but this time we're going to get the Stratos there. Then we can use its effect to summon itself, and then of course grab the field spell. Pretty straightforward, just like last time, except for now we're going to use the field spell. We're going to go ahead and discard a card, but this time we're going to grab ourselves Emeth 6. Now we have everything we need. We can use its effects, summon itself to the field, synchro it off into Legadia, draw a card, and then of course, well, in this case we could have set this, but in the end phase we can go ahead and put Primera back for our follow-up on our opponent's turn. And of course, the second they commit something to the field or make their first action, now we can start chaining our traps to start summoning themselves to the field. And of course, just like last time, we can chain block the search with our Primera with the field spell Synchro Summon, so that's pretty neat. You'll make yourself Crimson Dragon, you'll grab the follow-up, you'll target Legadia, and then of course tag out into Calamity. This deck's pretty unfair for what it can do with just one card, and I think obviously this makes for something that's a definite threat in the meta right now. So when it comes to beating this deck, there's a few options that you have. Obviously, hand traps are really good in this current format, so it's not a bad idea to kind of stick it out with that strategy. Obviously, you can use like Imperm and Valor on the Stratos and hope that's enough to stop them. Also, you can hold Imperm for the Crimson Dragon specifically. That way, you know, you don't get locked on your turn. Ash Blossom's actually kind of weak because the only time you're going to stop something, well, is the Stratos effect, because everything is just pulling out cards from the deck to just put them in the spell and trap zone, so Ash can be a little awkward. But as mentioned, something like Ghost Ogre is a really good card as well, because you can use them on the monsters when they're trap cards trying to summon themselves to the field. Also, if they don't already have a Centurion monster on the field, then technically you can Ghost Ogre the field spell. Maybe if they just start with the field spell, that's a good option for you to do. Cards like Drollin Lockbird and Nibiru really don't feel that great into this deck. Sure, if their only play is terraforming for the field spell and then you hit them with Droll and they have no other extenders, it might get the job done. But more times than not, it's really not that great. If anything, maybe you can use it to stop the draw when they make Legadia. And Nibiru is a really great card, but I don't know if you were counting the summons, but this deck summons literally 4 times, and then obviously Crimson locks you on your turn. Like I said, Imperm's pretty good because it can stop the Crimson Dragon if it's like the 6th card you drew for turn, but also cards like Forbidden Droplet, which have seen very good success in the current format, is amazing against this deck as well. Post side though, you have to take into consideration they have the searchable counter trap as well. So if you can, maybe try to pitch a trap card with that Droplet, that way they can't chain the counter trap in response. But honestly, if you really just don't want to have to think about it, just play Labyrinth, then you can just set 5 and pass, so well, the Calamity Lock does nothing against you. But in all seriousness, another great card against this deck is something like Cosmic Cyclone. Obviously going first, you can use it to hit their monsters, that way they don't hit the field. But even going second against this deck, when they go to summon the monsters to the field, that way they can synchro on your turn, you can just Cosmic the monster that's trying to bring itself out, that way you don't have to worry about it. There's a bunch of different floodgates you can side going first as well, but one that's hilarious is Unending Nightmare. For the cost of 1,000 life points, you can pop a face-up spell or trap, which is obviously really great at hitting the extenders, but the great thing about this card is it's not once per turn, so even if they have extenders to keep pushing through the one disruption, Unending Nightmare just kind of prevents them from playing the game at all, which is pretty hilarious. But just to quickly hop over to a basic deck list with the Horus cards, this is kind of what a deck would look like if somebody was wanting to pilot something like this. Again, take it with a grain of salt. As the format develops, the tech cards will change, but as you can see, you literally have everything past the sarcophagus to mess with, so when it comes to having room for non-engine, this deck has all the options in the world. Now really quickly, you might be asking why on earth would you play the Horus cards, and it's because not only does this also put up level 8 bodies to help put up something like, I don't know, Photon Lord to stop hand traps, but you also just get free level 8 bodies, so if your other cards get disrupted, then as long as you have the tuner, you can still combo from there. The downside of this engine is you do, again, have to send cards from your hand to the grave, and hand resource can be a little awkward with this deck. With the Horus cards, not only do you have a great engine to help you play through hand traps, but it also gives you a good engine to play into boards, because inherently these Horus cards are really good at pushing into fields. Again, you can see stuff like Crossout Designator in this deck, which you really don't need to play, but for right now, I think this is just a good template to go off if it's something you're interested in. The extra deck's pretty standard. I'm sure most players are going to be playing 2 Legadia alongside Crimson and of course Calamity. After that, it's just a couple of toolbox level 12s that you might need, especially if you're playing, I don't know, against Labyrinth and you don't need Calamity, you want other options as well. After that, it's just a rank 8 toolbox for removal, disruptions, and of course you also have the Heradic rank 8, which is really nice because it protects from targeting, which of course is really good at setting up Zeus. But then after that, it's just generically good stuff like Typhon for breaking boards, SP as an interruption or breaking boards as well, and this deck I have Dark because not only do you have the Horus cards, but you know, Trudea is also a Dark, and the only time you get locked, like I mentioned, is with the quick play spell, which isn't even a permanent lock. So again, Dark, bring back a monster, make an SP. Always a solid play for any deck. The side deck just has other options you could consider. Like I said, the Ice Prison's in here, another quick play that you could throw in. You have the other counter trap as well, which I think people are going to side, but you might see it in the main as well. There's also a Dogmatica package you could run, not only just with Nadir Servant, but you can use it to search Maximus to then dump stuff like Garura or Natis, generating more advantage. But you could also dump Lulu Wraith with Nadir Servant to then special summon a light spellcaster from your deck during the end phase. This can search you Primero, which then can search something like Emmet 6, so you can kind of extend and set up boards during the end phase. Again, it's not the prettiest engine, but it's definitely a popular one that I've seen pop up in the OCG. If you're doing that, you can even run Super Poly and just throw some more generic targets in there, making it to where this deck can break boards a lot easier. Going second with this deck, outside of having so much non-engine in it, can be a little awkward. The engine itself is good, but when you're playing into board with just Centurion cards, it feels very lackluster, and I think that's what's going to hold this deck back. As the format develops, we'll start to tinker with all the non-engine in this deck. That way it can better suit itself for going second. But another option that I've seen this deck run in the OCG is having a small, super heavy package. I'm personally not a big fan of this, but it does set up like Baron de Fleur plays, and you don't have to play a bunch of spells and traps. You obviously would probably cut back on some of the other engines that you're playing as well. But again, this is just a basic template to give you guys ideas to work with. That way, come release of Valiant Smashers, you guys are all prepared for what's to come. So I really hope this was all very informative, and as far as my personal opinion on how this deck is going to do this format, obviously any deck that can make Calamity going first, especially at the cost of, well, 1.5 cards, is gonna be a threat in the format. But like I mentioned, this deck really isn't the greatest at playing into boards. Hopefully these hand traps and board breakers can either help you push through or just stop those crazy end boards. That way your deck can thrive. But I don't see it taking over the format and being some kind of tier 0 deck. Definitely a solid tier 1.5 option, but I still personally don't see it being like one of the top 3 decks of the format, even though it's horrifying to have to play against. But that's going to wrap things up for today's video. Make sure you guys comment down below. Let me know what you think of the deck, other tech options you've seen played as well. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this will be the next best deck. It's really unfortunate that a lot of these cards are ultra rare in the next set because I really want to test this deck out. I will say, regardless of that, I am still excited to see what this deck can do because there's so many options on the table for this engine. As always, thanks for tuning in, and here's hoping to see you on the next one. Peace.